at what point did you kind of realize, like, oh, shit, this is serious?
There's a few. Like, I know you mentioned that maybe as a kid I don't remember, but I think there's a few moments. And one particular was especially when I lost my hair. Like, you know, you're a 6, 7 year old little girl, and, like, you're going through these treatments, and, like, yeah, you watched a little film where a character lost their hair. Like, okay. But it really started to hit when actual chunks of hair started falling out of my head. Like, I was in the shower washing my hair, and I started, like, screaming to mom and dad, and of course they ran into the bathroom.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Justin Rodriguez, your favorite lender here in Neighborhood Loans, and we're back with another episode of Cafecito Talks. I had enough Cafecito today, so we're not going to have another one before I have a heart attack. But we're super excited to announce the next guest of this podcast. It's super special to me because obviously this has been the person that literally has been with me since day one. And today I am proud to announce my sister, Alexis Rodriguez. So thank you so much for joining.
Hey, everybody. Nice to see you guys.
It's a pleasure. It's going to be a roller coaster of an episode. We're going to talk about a little bit of everything on her journey. She has a very special one. And really today, the focus is truthfully just kind of hearing our upbringing, how we came into the part that we're in today, and giving a little life update where we're at right now. So again, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely.
And if you want to go ahead and start with everybody giving a background on who you are and where your journey began.
Sure. Well, I am 27 years old, just a little background there. Had a great upbringing, you know, everything started off really great, which it still ended great, right? But it definitely started off really great. Always very close with my parents, very close with my brother. Always been, like, kind of family oriented, you know. It's been really great. So I'll definitely have to start off there. Things definitely started to take a turn when I turned 6, which is when I had been diagnosed with cancer. I know that was a topic of conversation that was held within the last podcast, at least the last viewing that I had been the opportunity to see, when the old white was actually in there. Yeah. So we had I saw that, and well, you know, I would definitely say that was one of the bigger hardships in my life, for sure. It was difficult. If I get emotional, I normally talk about this journey pretty easily, but I know that with you in the room and us kind of talking about this, it can get pretty hard. But the journey was pretty difficult, you know, from a 6-year-old basically having cancer for about 4 years, essentially being the guinea pig of a lot of different treatments, you know. I was pronounced close to stage 4. He essentially told me that I lit up like a Christmas tree, is how they refer to it. Doctors didn't necessarily know what to do. It was pretty bad. I guess to start off in regards to how I was actually diagnosed, it's actually a pretty sad story. I was in school one day at Yates Elementary, I'm sure you know. You know, we were there at the time. We were actually, my mom and dad had just bought the house in Bolingbrook. So they had just bought the house, but we were still going to school out in Yates, just because we were transitioning and they were trying to figure everything out at the time. Mom was actually still working as a person who would monitor hospitals and kind of check them out. So mom was actually traveling quite a bit. So with that being said, she wasn't really around as much. So at the time, dad was actually at home. I was at Yates that day, and, you know, I was just kind of relaxing, and all of a sudden I started getting really sick. I started feeling off. Like, I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then I started, you know, for lack of better words, I started vomiting pretty badly, and we didn't really know what was going on. And it was kind of uncontrollable. I was like, I don't know what's going on. So then, of course, the school naturally called dad. So he's like, yo, like, what's going on? So I told him that I'm not feeling good. I don't know what's really going on here. So then he ended up taking me to the closest hospital that was around there at that time. And the doctor was actually unfortunately didn't have the best circumstances. So when I went in, he didn't even take the time to really check. I mean, they still took vitals and they took everything that was pretty normal. But he just was very dismissive in regards to the way that I was feeling. It got to a point where he went up to Dad and he told Dad, so is your daughter like just doing this for attention? Are you sure she's not just seeking out attention? And he basically just gave me a pill and said that, oh, you have the stomach flu, that's it. And mind you, he still hadn't gotten the test results back, so we still don't know what's wrong with me at this point. I immediately threw them back out. Like, it was just like that. So Dad was like, no, there's something else wrong with her. And he was pissed, naturally. So when the doctor came back, his face turned pale white, because this is the same doctor that then had to go back and tell Dad that your daughter has cancer. And he was mortified, because, and Dad's face turned pale. Mind you, Mom is not home. At this time, she was not even in town, because she was still traveling to go review a hospital at the time. Mm-hmm. And essentially what had happened at that point is Dad immediately called Mom. And it's like, you have to come home now. And she was like, what's wrong? Is everything okay? He's like, I'm not telling you this over the phone, but you need to get home. Ironically, Mom's flight was supposed to take, I think a certain amount of time, 2 hours. She got home, got back to the hospital within an hour. We don't even know how that happened. It was wild how that timing worked. Even Dad was like, I don't understand how this happened, but it worked out. But as we're kind of pertaining, I ended up actually having to take the ambulance over because of how significant my diagnosis was, because like I said before, it lit up like a Christmas tree. It was pretty bad.
What specifically was it? The
cancer? So, yes, the cancer. So basically the type of cancer I had was leukemia, and it was ALL. So with
for those who don't know, how does leukemia work?
Yeah, I was about to say that. So with leukemia, and the way that it works is that you essentially do not have white blood cells to fight off certain diseases. So for example, the average person who maybe gets a cold or maybe gets the chicken pox, they have an immune system in which that's going to be able to defeat that. But in my case scenario, there was actually no white blood cells to be able to defeat anything. So even if I ended up getting a minor cold or anything like that, it would go from, oh my gosh, you need to immediately go to the hospital, which is why I had such a significant reaction the way that I did, because I must have gotten sick. So essentially your white blood cells are what basically fights your immune system. That's what helps it. So it doesn't produce enough. So I might be explaining it a little bit wrong, but essentially that's the gist that I got of it. So that's kind of what happened there. So we got to, my mom actually called, Dad actually called Dr. Lujan, which at the time was our pediatrician. And he had asked him, he was like, hey, what's it called? This is kind of what's going on. Do you have any suggestions on which hospital that we should take her to? And he immediately said Children's Memorial Hospital, now known as Ann Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital. So he's like, okay, fine, we'll take her there. So he had the ambulance immediately go over there into their pediatric unit. I was in the ER. So again, because of how significant my case was, there was a lot of doctors that weren't open to really taking it, because essentially, it's sad to say this, but I wasn't supposed to make it. It's with how significant it was. There was just no way that doctors saw it. But I had the wonderful blessing and opportunity to have somebody like Dr. Morgan to take the case. And she saw how difficult and significant it was. Mind you, this doctor's on a wait list. Again, another miracle at this point. She's on a wait list where there are so many kids and families that had wanted her at this time because of how amazing her practice is and the way that she does things. So everybody really wanted her, right? But it was a miracle because she actually ended up coming to us. At this point, I still did not know that I had cancer. I was still just the kid kind of sitting there just chilling, I was like, I'm feeling like shit, but I don't know what the hell's going on, so I'm just I don't know. So then Mom finally comes in, like I said, within that timing, which was crazy. Even Dad was like, how did you get here so quick? And she's like, I don't know, it was God, so we get there, Dr. Morgan talks, and she's like, would you like me to talk to her, or would you and this is based off Mom's story in which she told me, But Dr. Morgan asked, would you like me to talk to her, or would you like to have that conversation with her? And naturally, mom and dad were like, no, we want to be able to talk to her about it. So then mom and dad kind of came in, and you can tell mom's eyes were just this puffy red. I just remember this image vividly in my head. Mom just kind of came in, and she was like, Mama, like, I want to talk to you about something. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, she's like, Mama, you're actually really sick. And I'm like, well, okay. I'm like, that's fine. I could just take I'm a kid, so I'm like, oh, I'm just going to take medicine. It's fine. I'll be fine. And she's like, Mama, no, it's not that kind of sickness. It's like, it's going to be a really hard type of sickness. And everything kind of gets a little bit blurry from there, but it was a really difficult moment, and an image that really just stays in my head with specifically mom. I know dad was there for sure, but mom having to really sit there with these red puffy eyes and just essentially tell her 6-year-old daughter, like, you have cancer. Like, how do you tell a kid that, right? But she did the best that she could. And then at this point, we immediately had to start treatment. There was no time to kind of be like, oh, let's process. No, like, you have to jump in head first, because like I said, I was practically close to stage 4, and it was such an aggressive type of cancer. Like,
what's
leukemia.
The highest stage?
The highest stage is 4.
Mm-hmm.
And they essentially told me that if they didn't start treatment immediately, it would spread further, and then there was really not going to be any way for me to survive. I want to keep going, but I want to make sure I give you the opportunity if there's not any questions that you have before I continue. So,
no, keep going. I
yeah.
want to keep going.
Cool. So basically, at this point, they were trying to figure out a way to also inform the school, mind you, because I'm still a kid. I still have to go to school, and also find a way to educate me as well as students on what is going to happen as I start to kind of basically take chemotherapy. So they actually had, and we still have it at home, it's a VHS. It's a Charlie Brown VHS. Ironically, mom looks Snoopy now. I wonder why. But it was a Charlie Brown VHS, and his sister actually had cancer. And it showed, like, within a short span, like, what happens to the sister, and how the sister lost all her hair, how, it was really hard. It kind of showed, like, little snippets. So in my head, I'm like, oh, this is not too bad. That means, Mom, this is only going to last for a little bit. And mom had to kind of tell me, like, be realistic with me, and, like, Mama, this might not just last a year. This might last longer than that. I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. This is just so that you know what's going to happen. So immediately when I started treatment, my face had the reaction to it. So it wasn't even like an allergic reaction. It's just a side effect that happens with the medication. And my face was, like, literally blotches of, like, red, like, dots everywhere. And I immediately asked my doctor, because Dr. Morgan came in, and I was a sassy little girl, and I still am till this day. But, like, I went to her and I was like, what is this on my face? Why do I have this all on my face? What's going on here? And she's like, well, miss, this is a response to your chemo. And she's like, I'm like, well, we gonna need to figure this out, because I don't got time for this. Like, in my little kid words, right? This is the best thing that I can remember, but I just remember getting so angry at that. But kind of going back to the conversation in regards to having to tell the school, right? Because I essentially wasn't going to be in school a lot, and a lot of the kids needed to be aware that I was going to be losing my hair, and I essentially had to wear a hat. Mind you, in school, that's not allowed. You can't wear a hat. So kids had to be educated. There was an actual teacher that came in to educate them about what was going to happen moving forward, and how I wasn't going to be in school a lot. But when I did come, to be kind, to be as thoughtful as possible, because there is a lot that's going on with her. And, there was one person, I want to do a little shout out for her, because her and her dad was, like, the most sweetest people in this process. They did everything possible, always checked in on me, always make sure that I was okay. Every time I came into school, my girl Sarah Martinez, like, I'll never forget her. Like, she would always, like, her and her dad, if we went on field trips, anything like that, her dad would always be like, Mama, are you okay? And Mr. Randall, like, Mr. Randall knew my situation. And ironically, at the time, how I had mentioned, and I, not to just kind of jump the track, but I want to make sure I say this part too, you know, initially Mom had the job where she would travel. Obviously, she can't do that anymore. Like, she legitimately can't travel anymore. Like, what is she supposed to do? So she had gotten her, I think she was, like, in the mix of getting her teacher license. I don't know the specific story. But long story short, when Mr. Randall found out what was going on, you know, he was like, oh my gosh, this is really crazy. So he wanted to do everything possible to help. Anything that Mom needed, he was like, hey, like, I help you out. Mom is in this job, and essentially because Mom's taking so much time off, I'm freaking sick in the hospital. Like, obviously, like, she's going to take a lot of time off. And they had actually just changed management at that place that she was working at. So the old management was really understanding, but when the new management came in, they gave Mom a really hard time in regard to that. So they essentially were like, you can't take any more time off. Like, you're going to need to figure it out, and you're going to need to come into work. Like, this is a job. You can't just not work, you know? And Mom's like, well, then I guess I'm not working here anymore, because at the end of the day, this is my child. She has freaking cancer, and I have to be in the hospital. Mind you, Dad's an accountant too, so he can't leave. He's trying to balance everything, you know? Mom and Dad are trying to balance everything and figure it all out. So Mom ended up leaving that job. And ironically, remember how Mr. Randall was like, if you guys need anything, my mom was crying from what she told me, and she was like a mess, and she was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, I'm not working here anymore, but we obviously need a job. I don't know what I'm going to do. So she ended up, I guess, breaking down one day with Mr. Randall, and Mr. Randall was like, no, you got a job here. Don't worry about it. I think she became a fourth grade teacher. He's like, no, you don't have to worry about it. You have a job here. You need to stop. You need to take care of your kid. Any time off that you need, you take it off. It's not even a question about it. We will have a substitute ready to go. You don't worry about it. You know? And Mom was like, he's like, you don't need to say anything. This, like I said, this is not a question. You have a job here now. If you need to administer any medications to your kid, they actually ended up having to get a nurse in the school because of how much medication I needed to take throughout the day. So they had a nurse for me, as well as another girl at the time who had, with the blood sugar. Do you remember what that diagnosis is called? Mm-hmm. They have, like, low blood sugar. Either way, they had to have someone there that had to monitor and all that stuff. Predominantly for my cancer, but they also had to have it there for her as well. Mom was also there just to make sure that in case I didn't respond very well to certain medications or I was feeling unwell. And I had mentioned earlier in the story that Mom and Dad had just bought the house in Bolingbrook. Yeah. And I don't know if I should be saying this part out loud. But basically, it was Children's Memorial Hospitals in Chicago.
Right, so for able to be enrolled in that, yeah. You're living in.
So what do we got to do? How am I enrolling? You know, so I ended up we stayed in Chicago. I ain't gonna say how, but we stayed in Chicago, and because it was just easier to commute, right? A huge part of the person, a big piece that really helped us throughout this process was Vita Gloria, just the grandparents, Vita Gloria, Vito Mario, Abuela Marta, Abuelo Carmelo, Titi Dori. Oh my gosh, she was a huge part, and I hope at some point we can get into conversation about her. And I also little Gladys too. And I don't want to not shout out everybody. All the family. Thank you. You guys did great. I don't want to hear, oh, why didn't you say my name? It's like, no, like no, everybody. It's everybody. It's, you know, it takes a village, right? I need to do that because you already know how it's gonna be. But I guess, you know, especially with like Vita Gloria, because her house is actually the closest to Children's. So if anything ever happened, like if I got sick at school, Mom couldn't always leave all the time because maybe she was in the middle of class and I started feeling sick throughout the middle of the day, so she can't just up and go. So Bito would come pick me up immediately right after, and I would just go back.
What's crazy about the whole story is when you're telling me about everything, when I'm thinking about the story from my perspective, I don't mom and dad did a really, really good job because first off, a lot of it's a blur. Like I remember vivid memories in the hospital day to day, but a lot of the moments that we were sharing in the hospital, I feel as if mom and dad didn't want to tell me because they didn't want to get me sad as a little kid. So for a lot of it, I was oblivious for years. I feel like I was super oblivious to a lot of different things when we're going about the journey and figuring out. It wasn't until years later that I think when you started going to camp, which I'm sure we'll start talking about that. Yeah. But when we started going to camp, obviously you see other kids with no hair and you're like, well, you know, even when you didn't have hair, for me, I didn't think anything of it until you started going to camp, and I'm like, oh wait, did she have cancer? You know, I guess we kind of knew, but I was just too young to comprehend it. You know, sure. I just knew you were sick, and it wasn't, and I think maybe emotionally I'm suppressing it. You know, I think a lot of it is just suppressed, and I don't really think about it, and I don't really talk about it. But I think it's important for everybody that is watching it to hear the entire journey of it, right? Like you start from obviously being a little girl, and you're very sassy and very you know. I think it is better to, and this kind of sounds bad, but it's better to have cancer while you're younger because you're kind of naive in a way, so you don't really know, you're not as negative about it because you don't really hear as many negative stories about cancer or any illness because you don't really know anything other than to fight. So at least when you're younger, it's a little bit kind of, I guess it's kind of like a mechanism where you're kind of not thinking of anything negative in a way, as much as when you're older, I would feel as if like, the only other downside is that when you're younger, obviously your immune system isn't as strong. Yeah. But we'll break that down for me. If you had the earliest memory that you have when you were in the hospital and going through your day in, day out, at what point did you kind of realize like, oh shit, this is serious?
There's a few. Like, I know you mentioned that maybe as a kid I don't remember, but I think there's a few moments. And one particular was especially when I lost my hair. Like, it, you know, you're a 6-7-year-old little girl, and like you're going through these treatments, and like, yeah, you watched a little film where a character lost their hair. like okay, but it really started to hit when actual chunks of hair started falling out of my head. Like, I was in the shower washing my hair, and I started like screaming to mom and dad, and of course they ran into the bathroom. And this was actually at the new house at the time because we were trying to get some adjustment there. Chunks of my hair was falling out of my head, and they were like, oh my gosh, what happened? They ran in the bathroom, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. My hair, it's just, there's so much falling out. They're like, and it's almost like you have to sit there and they have to be like, well, yeah, this is normal. How do you tell like a 6-7-year-old kid that it's normal for your hair to fall out? Like, you know, and for me, like, my hair was my life, and it still is till this day. It means so much to me. But I guess, like, with that being said, I would say that was a huge, like, significant moment. I guess when it came to more so like appearances, like that was just so difficult for me. Having to try to figure out like, am I pretty enough? Am I beautiful? Like, just really questioning a lot of that. And I really want to do a shout out to One Step at a Time camp, because that really allowed me to be able to have the opportunity to be around other kids that made me feel like what I was going through was actually normal, which it isn't. But when you're surrounded by other kids that understand that and that essentially are going through similar, if not the same thing as you, it's very much so this comforting feeling of like, okay, there are other kids that don't have hair too. So it's like, okay, then I'm not the only one. And I think that's why I struggled so much when I would come back home, because it's almost like I had to come back to reality of, wait a second, I'm back in the space where nobody else is understanding what this is feeling like. And it's like, okay, but I have to keep going. I would say another huge significant piece. There's two more, and the one I'm about to mention now. It was when I had my stroke. And essentially what had happened was this has never happened before, bro. Dr. Morgan was looking at me like, little girl, what the hell is going on here, bro? So it was 2 antibiotics that you had mixed together. And it actually caused me to have a stroke. Dr. Morgan had to open a book and essentially put in that I am a 1% of a child. Nobody's ever had this before. And if so, it hasn't been reported in the books. I'm the first kid that ever had a stroke from mixing 2 freaking antibiotics together, you know? And it was just like a moment for me, because the reason that it's so significant is I was actually, again, I guess it's circling back, but we were at Yates. I was at Yates, and I wasn't feeling too good. And Miss Filipponi was our teacher at the time. That poor teacher had to go through so much with us, bro. But she was my teacher, and if there was any point that I ever needed to lay down, if I needed to relax, she would always like have a little cot ready for me, and I would lay down, and then that was it. So I told her, I'm like, hey, I'm not feeling too good. I really want to lay down. So I laid down. I actually took a nap. When I woke up, I believe it was the entire right side of my body. I could not feel it. Mind you, I'm laying down on the floor, and I had to call out to a student to get their attention because I couldn't scream. I couldn't talk. So I had to try and like get their attention as best as I could. And I had to be like literally like, hey, like, so Miss Filipponi noticed that I was struggling because she was checking on me. Finally, she got the attention, and I'm like, there's something, and I had to talk through the side, and she was like, I told her, I'm like, there's something wrong. So the janitor at Yates, Miss Filipponi, and Mom was at the school. They had to run downstairs, or Mom ran downstairs, and the janitor had to help me up and put me on a rolling chair. And Mom wasted no time. She's like, oh, hell no. So she wasted 0 time. I just remember getting in the car, ending up at Children's, like their emergency section. Mom immediately called Dr. Morgan. She had that girl on speed dial. Like, this is what's going on. You need to get her to the hospital now. She's like, oh, no. We are in the ER right now. What are we doing now? What's the plan? You know, so Mom knew the lingo. Mind you, Mom was a pre-med student. So this is how she knew so much information and how she was so aware. There was points where she would have to administer some of my stuff. Like, she didn't really have to get taught because she was a pre-med student. She knew how to do a lot of this stuff. But when she heard that, she was like, oh, hell no. She knew them signs right away. So she immediately wasted no time. And I get there, you know, and it was so hard for me because I don't know if this is normal when you're in recovery after a stroke. And just to preface, like, before I had gotten cancer, I was actually, and this is going to lead back into the conversation, before I had cancer, I was basically a gifted child is what they refer to it as. I'm not trying to toot my own horn by any means, but you know, when I was in preschool at the time when we were at St. Sylvester's, which is our preschool that I went to, I was essentially like, they were like, okay, yeah, no, you need to be moving up like 2 grade levels. Like, you are just, I was boarding class, you know, but going fast tracking to the stroke, it went from being a gifted to knowing everything to things coming so easily to me to essentially part of my brain stopped working. And it caused me to have short-term memory loss and dyslexia. Do you know how frustrating it was as a kid to go from being able to pick everything up right away, things came so easy to me, to then like actually really struggling to just get through school, barely being able to pass classes, like just struggling so much. Essentially, like, people, as you start to get older and as you start to kind of go through and they start to do brain waves and they check all that stuff and they're like, yeah, you're gonna fail out, you're like, based on what they saw. And I can't blame them. I think for a while I had a lot of like animosity towards them. Like, why would they say this to me? Now I have more of an understanding, especially being in the type of position that I am, which we'll get into as well. But they essentially told me, well, based on the results, like, you're going to fail out of, you're going to maybe pass high school, probably fail out, and not go to college. That's how bad things were in my brain. Like, there was no way. So then when I finally started going into high school, like, I was getting C's, and they were so, like, C's, B's, C's. They have no idea how I was doing this. They were shocked. They were like, I don't know how this is working. This is completely defiant science. Like, this doesn't make no sense. But again, like, going back to the defining moment per se, there was also a point when I was in the recovery for having a stroke where I couldn't move certain parts of my body. So Dad would legit have to pick me up and move me places. And if somebody were to move my leg, I would start screaming because of the pain that it would feel.
It would hurt to move your leg?
It would hurt. I don't know what I don't know why. I'm so confused. I'm like, is this normal for like a stroke? But I will never, this is another image that just stays with me in my head where like I would have my foot up like this, right? On a little, there's a little thing underneath, whatever. My foot was up. And when Dad would have to remove it, I would start screaming in pain. I don't know why. It was just excruciating pain. And I just saw the look in Dad's face, like, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do wrong? Like, and he didn't do anything wrong. Like, he was just basically helping me to go upstairs because it was time for me to go to bed. So I remember, like, again, I guess to clarify, we're in the new house still in Bolingbrook. And I remember him just carrying me up those steps. And I'm just crying in his shoulder. And it was just like that moment of like, this fucking sucks. Like, this really sucks. I don't know how I was able to recover and being able to, because technically, again, going back to results, they said my right side of my body should have been paralyzed right now. We still don't know. I know. I'm a faithful person. I believe in God, like, especially with everything that I went through. I know it was God. But if you're looking at science, like, there ain't no way to prove that shit. Like, how the hell am I able to completely move everything so normally? It doesn't make sense. So that's the second. Mind you, it's hard, man. The third was when, and I believe Mom and Dad actually talked about this in their section of the podcast, but it was when I actually went into a coma. This, again, this is a real tough story for me. This is probably one of the most, like, really trauma-filled ones for me. So I went, and when I say these stories, like, I had fantastic doctors, and when I say some of these situations in regard to this doctor that I'm going to refer to, none of the other ones were like this, okay? Like, I don't want any bad blood or anything like that. Like, everybody was so fantastic. There are just, unfortunately, some bad apples in a tree. It just happens, okay? So when I say this story, I just wanted to clarify that. But it went back to me freaking getting damn allergic reactions, bro. Again, Dr. Morgan was like, little girl, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, I would get allergic reactions after allergic reactions. Like, it was bad, you know? And I'd practically live at the hospital. That was pretty much my home. Like, the hospital was my home, right? But anyway, I guess kind of going back, like, I was taking these antibiotics and I was feeling weird. I was already in the ER because my platelets were low. Don't ask me how to describe that because I don't know how to describe that. But I just know that Mom would never tell me if your platelets are low and you have a fever, you immediately have to go to the hospital because, again, your immune system is low, right? So they were like, no, you have to come in. So I was already in the ER because my platelets were low. So they immediately had given me antibiotics to help basically fight off whatever I needed to fight off. And I told Mom, I'm like, Mom, I'm feeling a little weird. And this image, I'm walking to the bathroom in the ER and I'm sitting, and then I kind of sit there and I'm like, something's wrong. Like, I'm having trouble breathing. I'm like, Mom, there's something wrong. And she's like, Mama, what's wrong? Like, she would always like, is your face swelling? And sometimes when Mom asked me these damn questions, it would drive me crazy because she would ask me them every time. I understood why, though, because I would get so many. She's like, well, explain to me what you're feeling exactly. I'm like, I'm feeling weird in my lungs. Like, I need to gasp more for air than what's needed. And then she was like, okay, well, after we're done here, we're going to put your gown back on and we're going to go straight to the doctor. And at the doctor that was on the ER floor in the PM time and the night shift. So, we went up to him and I was like, she explained to him what I was feeling and I tried to explain to him what I'm feeling as I'm still trying. He checked my heart and he's like, you're fine. He went to my mom on the side, and was like, are you sure she's not just like, because she's a little bit overweight, you sure she's not just doing this to get attention? I didn't know that part of the story until Mom told me after the fact. Okay? Mom looked at this mofo like, who the do you think you're talking to? My daughter's telling me that she needs trouble gasping for air, and your freaking first thought is that, oh, is it because she's overweight? Mind you, I'm overweight because of all the medication I'm on. It causes you to do that, happens to you, So Mom was like bombastic side-eye, right? So I end up going back into my room and I'm just sitting there. Next thing you know, I don't even remember like how it got to this point, but I stopped breathing. I couldn't breathe. And this was really hard because I remember like laying on the bed and I did not want Mom to leave my side. And I looked at her in the eye and I asked her this question. I literally looked at her and I was like, am I going to die today? I asked her that because I couldn't breathe. Next thing you know, they called the code blue. All the nurses and doctors come running in. All of them running in here into the room. It's a swarm of them. That just, when you call code blue, that shit's crazy. Like, that means like that's like the worst code you can call. At least one of them, to my knowledge. And I just remember knocking out. That's all I remember. I remember Mom standing by my side, swarm of nurses, and I passed out. And I guess that's when I went into my coma.
How long were you out for?
I don't remember the days. I don't know.
It was days?
I don't I don't know.
For everybody, background, like, if I'm being honest with you, I feel like a lot out of tune with that. Like, I knew you had strokes. I didn't know how many strokes. I did not know you had a coma. Like, I think that for a long time, Mom and Dad tried to keep a lot of the stuff away from me because they didn't want, I was young. I was probably like 4, 5, 6 years old. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I didn't really know the significance of everything. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I would try to be as positive as I could. Mom and Dad would always try to keep me busy throughout the entire journey, so that way I never really knew and understand. I think that's part of the reason why I'm wired the way that I'm wired today. Like, I always, whenever hardship comes on, like, the only thing I know is to work harder, and to like push through things. But I want you to kind of shine light afterwards, because I could really see where your turning point was, and I really think it was camp. Because I really do remember you didn't want to go to camp. It was hard. And again, me talking about this, it's really hard to like think about the memories. The only memories I really had of the hospital were positive memories.
Absolutely.
Ice cream. I have one negative memory that I remember, but I remember me grabbing the ice cream in the freezer in the room. And I remember exactly, I would walk over there and get the ice cream in a little cup. I remember playing in the little room with Brian. Yeah. I remember going to McDonald's all the time.
What's the negative memory?
Spinal Tap.
Oh.
That was the worst.
You had to see it, or?
I saw it. I don't know how.
I didn't know that.
I didn't even, the door was open.
What?
I remember it was like right by the room where you would play, and I remember I was watching.
Right.
And all I remember was the Spinal Tap happen and then the blood come out. And for
Oh,
people
that
that don't know,
was
like it's
yeah.
a really 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 big shot, and it was like a gun. It was like a
Oh,
gun with a needle.
you don't want to look it up, because if you look it up, you'll see how long it is. And the point to us, by the way, just to add a little preface to this, the point of a spinal tap is to make sure that the cancer is not spreading to my spine. That's why I had to get them. So I legit had to get one every week. That thing that you saw, I had to get that every week. My back was so sore, it was purple. There was a time where they couldn't it's like, that's why it's so long, because you have to legit dig into your spine, and they have to draw out like this liquid. I don't know what exactly, but you had to draw it out. So there was a time where it wasn't working, so they kept digging, and I was like screaming. I'm like, you need to stop. Like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't. I'm done. Mind you, I'm a 6-7-year-old. I can't do this, bro. They kept digging, and I'm like, I can't. Like, it's too much. I don't want to do this anymore. And even mom was like, okay, we're done. We're not doing it this week, you know? And I just remember Marissa, which was the child life specialist at the time, she was sitting there, like, and she would always, every single spinal tap I was in, she would always be there, you know? And then the other person I really want to shout out to is Katie, the other nurse. If she ever has this opportunity, Marissa and Katie, they were, and Julie was the child life specialist, I believe, in the ER room. But Marissa would go to every single spinal tap that I had. Any opportunity, she would be there. Like, it was, she would hold my hand. But that day, she was even like, we need to stop.
Well, I think I just got to give you your flowers. Like, if I'm being honest, again, I don't get, when I think of emotion, I think, okay, just go positive. Like, really just go straight to, like, kind of don't even think about it. Just go positive and keep pushing. Yeah. And I got to give you your respect and flowers for the stuff, because truthfully, the journey of everything, I don't really ask, because I don't really want to ask and bring back those type of memories and bring back the negativity. But at the same time, like, I got to give you your props, because you were facing the eyes of death. Like, you were facing the eyes of through an illness that, you know, not a lot of kids have the opportunity to say that they made it out of. And, you know, looking back, when I'm thinking of all the memories that happened, you know, I all I can really remember is just being there and not really understanding what was going on. Like, I never really understood what was going on until, you know, you get older, and then you don't really realize it yourself. It's like your days in life are not guaranteed ever. And that's the weird part about life. I watched this the thing that the wear sunscreen, the one that Theo always plays. One where it's a weird thing that's kind of like a song or whatever, but it has a lot of good quotes. But it says, you don't know bad news until bad news hits you on an idle Tuesday. And it's pretty much saying that you don't expect bad news to happen. The worst news happens when it just happens on a random day that you weren't even expecting it. Yeah. And that's the times that you have to look back and you're like, oh shit, like, this is what fucked up about life. You know, you don't really know when stuff is gonna hit. But if you're looking back now on your entire journey, what's ironic about your journey is that you come full circle, and now you're in the medical field. You're helping other patients who have situations that you dealt with yourself. But if you had to look back, how do you think you would kind of talk to yourself, the younger version of yourself? How do you think it played out, and what advice would you give to yourself if you were knowing the knowledge that you do now? How would you talk to yourself about everything and how to push through, you know?
It's a question that, I'm going to be very honest with you, I don't know the answer to. Because I feel like what I did as a kid, being older and having the knowledge that I would have now, I almost wouldn't want to tell my younger self to know the things that I had to go through to be where I am now. And when I say that, I want to preface that I would never change anything that's happened to me, because I even tell my clients this all the time. Like, and just to say, I'm a social work therapist, so I work in a private practice, and, you know, when clients are always talking about, like, oh, like there's so much negative stuff, there's so these negative things are happening, or if they ever do talk about it, I'm always like, and I never try to minimize them, but I help them think about the idea of like, you have a kid that maybe came from everything, that was given everything in their whole life, they were handed everything to them, and then a kid that came from the straight up like nothing. And then both kids move up. Both kids are in the same space now. One's a millionaire, the other's a millionaire. But guess what? Which one do you think is going to take the time to truly appreciate how they were able to get there? It's not to say that this kid didn't appreciate it. Of course, at least I would hope that they would. But this kid truly is like, damn, like I fucking did this. Like I'm here now. You know? So I say this to them and I'm like, if I'm being honest with you guys, I wouldn't be sitting probably in front of you right now had I not gone through what I went through. Truly. I'd probably be maybe a lawyer or like a doctor or some, because of how the level, and not to minimize the intelligence that I have now, but how impressive my memory was wild. Mom even said there was a point where she's like, I don't even know if you had freaking photographic memory. You were just so intelligent. It was wild, you know? So I guess, like I said, I wouldn't look back at my younger self, and I don't think I would say anything to them, because I would just have to allow my younger self to go through the path that they had to go through, like, in order for me to be where I am now. And I hope that answers your question.
I mean, it's a classic. Everything happens for a reason, you know. Everything played out the way that it did, yeah. and it's something that, you know, I think it's hard enough, especially as parents. And my daughter had RSV, and that was hard. Not to take anything away from RSV, but it's just like you just really sit there and think. We were there for 2 weeks, but I can't imagine, which I kind of did live a portion of it, like living in a hospital. But like, I can't imagine being as a parent, being there day to day. And obviously, as a 6-year-old girl, being in the hospital day to day and not really understanding it, do you feel like you suppress those memories, or does it come out, or like how does that play in your life today, having all the trauma that you know went through?
That's a good question. There was a point where there is a memory that's completely blacked out, and a lot of the memories, the reason that they're blacked out, from what the doctors told me, was predominantly due to the stroke. A lot of long, like short-term memories that I tried to have, it just wasn't really retaining themselves. But you know, when you have trauma, you do black out memories. Like, it's not even a question. Like, being a therapist now and looking at people who either have post-traumatic stress, like, they even say, they're like, and I'm going to be very frank with you, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder when I was going into my own therapy, you know? And with that being said, it's called trauma blocking. That's what it's called. Your brain blocks certain pieces of it so that it doesn't have to remember, maybe because it's not ready, or just simply because your brain just cannot tolerate that level of pain. That's legitimately what it is.
Do you remember the feeling of strokes or of...
The strokes, yeah.
Strokes. Do you remember leukemia? How did it feel, like, day to day? Like, did you just feel tired? Did you feel...
Yeah.
How did you feel?
It was... The stroke I remember pretty significantly because of how the pain that I had described to you earlier. The pain of spinal taps, I can't tell you, sit here and tell you I know exactly the way it feels, no. But I just think about how excruciating it was. It's weird every now and then, like, I'll get a pain in my back and I start tearing up. Because it's this spot that they would always hit with the spinal tap. And I always freak out. Like, I'm always like, oh my gosh, like, or like, if I start showing some of the symptoms of when I had initially had cancer, which it happened one time to me.
How old were you when it showed?
I was in high school. I was either sophomore or junior in high school.
How do you show signs? Like, what is it?
So at the time when I was initially diagnosed, I told you how I was vomiting. I actually had pretty bad side pain. And it almost felt, I don't want to go too much into detail, but like it felt as though almost like my pants or my undergarments were like more tight on me, even though like it wasn't that. It was just so bad. And then like I remember there was a time where I was in high school, I think it was like a sophomore junior year, and I started feeling those same pains. I started vomiting and I started freaking out. I started crying and I was like, oh my gosh, what if I have cancer again? I don't know how I would do it again, bro. Like, I'm dead ass. Like, I have a best friend, Abby, that I actually met through camp, known her since I was 13 years old. She actually had cancer when she was a teenager, so I can't even imagine how difficult that was for her, to actually remember everything. that I don't know how she did it. But that's my girl.
And do you have a lot of friends that went in remission, like they had cancer and then the cancer came back and they had to go through it all over again?
Sadly, yeah. I had a counselor of mine. His name was Chris. He was freaking hilarious, man. Every time I would see him, be like, hey, Chris. He'd be like, hey, Lexi. Every time. He was so funny. 20 years without cancer. 20 years. Typically, when you're in finalized remission state, so is when you reach up to 7 years. That means you're pretty good. You know, you go from having to see the doctor weekly to having to go monthly to then having to go yearly. To go yearly, you have to have 7 years of having basically remission. Remission does not mean that you're cured. So technically, the cancer is still in me. It's the way that they described it is that it's asleep. But going back to my boy Chris, like 20 years in remission, and he was re-diagnosed and he had it again. I actually had so for us it's a joke because like we're cancer kids, so we can have these jokes with each other. But I remember a group of friends that I would hang out with when in camp. We were at Six Flags, and some kids were able to kind of go through the wheelchair section. And one of the guys I would hang out with, he was like, he'd be like, oh, I had cancer twice. Oh, I had cancer 3 times. And like it was like a running joke, like who should go in the front. Mm-hmm. But for us it's funny because we are able to make light of it. Mm-hmm. You know, to the outside person, they're looking at us like, what the hell is wrong with you guys making fun of that, right? But I deter. Going back to my boy Chris, like he had 20 years cancer free, and unfortunately he relapsed, and unfortunately he didn't make it. That was hard because I saw that on Facebook. You know, he was my counselor. He taught me this Hannah Montana dance as a standard camper. I was like 6-7 years old. I'll never forget it. Pop it, lock it, polka dot. Like he taught me that, and just remembering him, and he was such a great counselor. And unfortunately he didn't make it. And then recently finding out that another one of my old counselors, and we actually became real close to my girl Michelle, she unfortunately also relapsed. And she didn't realize that it was happening until she started to notice pretty significant weight loss. And she has this all posted on Instagram, so I don't want people to think I'm just out here telling her story. And she's public. So, but basically in the Instagram post that she posted, she realized she was losing pretty significant body weight. She's like, okay, what the hell? She's already tiny. So she's like, what is going on? Her body was deteriorating. And that's how she found out.
So how do you feel like, looking back on the journey, looking back at your friends and everything, how do you think it shifted your perspective on life overall right now that you're able to kind of see everybody's life perspectives, your friends, and you know, just everything? It's got, obviously it's traumatic and there's a lot of different things, but how does that shift your mindset today on your perspective on life?
I would say that the easy answer is life is short. I mean, I think that's a given. But it's not guaranteed. It's not like you think everything is going so smoothly in life, and then like you hear stuff like that. Like I would have never thought any of those people would relapse, or even close friends of mine that died. You know, one went into remission for, unfortunately, a short period of time. She specifically, when she relapsed, she knew she wasn't going to make it. And she asked her mom if her quinceañera dress could be black, and she wanted to be buried in it when she died. So it's like you look back at stuff like that, and you're just like, you appreciate life, but you almost at the same time, it's like you ask yourself, like, it's called survivor's guilt, or like, why me? For me, it's like I question, like, why did God choose me? Because when I had the coma, when I was in it, I was essentially pronounced brain dead. And they told mom and dad, you need to start getting ready for her funeral. She's not going to make it. I think there was like maybe a 5% chance. Maybe. I think it's lower than that. But once you're pronounced that, that's it. You know?
Can you like sit there and imagine as a parent?
Like
you're sitting there, okay, 95% chance, and then you don't want to tell your daughter that. You're trying to be as positive as you possibly can.
I was asleep.
Right.
I wasn't awake. I didn't know. I didn't even know that happened until mom told me. I had no idea, bro. Like, I found out a couple years ago that was the case. Like, legit.
If I'm being honest, I think my perspective on it, like, I think recently I started processing everything. Like, recently.
Interesting.
It's
okay.
weird. It's recently I started processing everything, and it's not until, you know, I moved out on my own, and you know, it's there's a lot of different things. I think every single day I'm glad that I go to the gym, because those are the moments where you start sitting there really thinking about life. You start thinking about you know, your own family. You start thinking about the things you're grateful for. You start thinking about, you know, in your case it's survivor syndrome, and mine is imposter syndrome. It's like, why am I put in this position right now? Why, you know, why am I living the life that I'm living? And in those cases, right? And you start sitting there thinking, like, you know, why did we do that as family? What if? Then you start thinking about the what ifs. What if my family goes through that? What if this would occur? What would I do? How would I react as a father?
Oh, yeah.
Am I enjoying life? Am I enjoying life enough?
Yeah.
With the stuff that I'm doing? Obviously, I work hard every day, so it's like your situation comes up in my mind, and I'm like, damn, you know, like, what does all this matter? You know, you plan for the future as if you know you're gonna have one, and that's what sucks. Like, you don't know your life is guaranteed tomorrow, so you don't know what's gonna happen in the next chapter, and you're sitting here saying, oh, I want the big house, I want the big car, I want, you know, to be as successful as you possibly can be. And I say that all the time. I preach about it every single day, because I'm working the hardest that I possibly can be. But then it's like, is your life guaranteed? Are you spending enough time with your family? Are you, you know, being there in certain things? So I question myself in a lot of different ways in that regard, with family, friends, you know, and that's the blessing. A blessing about me is I try. I have mom's traits and certain things where, like, I try to make everybody happy.
Yeah.
And you know, you start thinking about it where you're like, you can't make the world happy, unfortunately. Yeah. And that's where, you know, your journey overall is a tough one and a tough pill for me to swallow. Yeah. And again, that's why I'm saying, when I lift and everything, it comes up in my own head, because you start thinking about the entire thing. I realized in my life, my first half of my life, I feel like it's suppressed. Like, I feel like it's in a, you know, weird way. My body and my mind and my soul is just like, all right, don't talk about it, keep going. Until recently, it's weird. Like, 25 years of living, and you don't pick up things until now, and you don't really start thinking about it. I remember going to camp, dropping you off. I remember being there in certain things, and my mind never processed it as a really negative thing. It never was like, yo, your sister's going through this. Yo, your sister's going through this. It's just smile and be there for your sister. Like, that was really how my mind always processed everything. From your perspective, how did you see me as a brother going through that perspective? How did you, like, did you see any difference in me? Did I ever seem sad? Like, I want to hear your third-party perspective of me throughout the entire journey.
You know, I think, like, I remember when you would come in, like, you would always want the damn GameCube every freaking time. And then I would love watching you play video games. I don't know why. I loved it. And it's ironic because as we became older and teenagers, I still, like, when you play Batman, if you play Injustice, whatever, like, I loved watching you play video games because I sucked at them. Like, I'm just not good at them, right? But in regard to the journey, I just remember you kind of like, when you would come, it would be nice to see you. It would be nice to see my brother. But also, like, I guess, like, thinking now, I don't always remember everything, but thinking back now, like, I always wonder, like, damn, like, I can't imagine as a parent, like, I feel like shit sometimes of, like, knowing that I receive so much attention, and yet I found that your attention was, like, neglected to an extent. Looking back now, like, it makes me feel bad, like, there's so many things that I look back on and I'm like, shit, I'm like, this sucks, like, we could have had another brother, like, we would have had another brother here. He would have been Marseille's age, bro. Like, it makes me feel like sometimes shit, like, fuck, like, this sucks, man. Like,
yeah, and that's
I
a whole
hope that my
nother
brother's
story.
getting enough attention, like, like, I hope that he's enjoying, and which it makes me happy to hear that. But I also know that because of that, it's almost in a way forced you to learn how to do things on your own. Hence why I feel like you're in the profession that you're in, where it really kind of forces you to kind of like, hey, you got to get it on, like, we got to keep going. I also feel like part of me might have ADHD, and I think you know that. But again, like, I think with that being said, mama and dad always kept you busy, so I don't even feel like it was a second thought for you. But I think internally, being the therapist that I am, having the mentality that I am, I know that there's a lot of internalized emotion there.
That's fair. I figured that out. I figured you were the one that pointed that out to me. I didn't really realize it until we had a conversation in the car, and we were talking about it, and I didn't feel like mom and dad ever neglected me, so they did an amazing job as parents. I never felt it, but I could see where you're coming from. But I was just so busy that I never really, like, I didn't think anything of it. I'd play basketball, I would go to the hospital, and I would do things that kind of distracted me away from him. So I'm, again, when I was really young, I feel like I did the same thing. I just distracted my mind when things were going bad, and you just kind of avoid things, and it develops negative habits as you get older, and you kind of recognize that. But at the end of the day, I think that overall, I want all the people that are listening. I think this podcast, for people that are watching, has to be something that motivates and inspires people, that the second half of your life, the second half of your journey, it's not determined based upon the first chapter of your life. The second chapter, you dictate what your future outcome could be. So I want you to, like, shine light to all the young individuals who might have been through this journey, who have, whether it been cancer or even family issues or any things that they did occur in their first chapter. How can they use that as fuel to just become the best version of themselves?
I think it's another really great question. I think it's just a matter, I mean, again, like, I'm a firm believer in, like, therapy. So I always encourage people, if they can, like, I always even tell people, like, if you haven't even gone through anything significant in your life, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can't talk about, right? So I always try to allow the fuel of being able to process emotions as a form of fuel, right? I think, like, you have to think about yourself like a car. Like, if there is no gas in your tank, you can't go anywhere. So I always try to encourage and inspire people to go to therapy. You know how happy it makes me? And I think it's a given that's, oh, women go to therapy, talk about their emotional whatever. But, like, when I see a man come into my office, or even just males in the office, period, coming into therapy, it makes me so happy, because it gives them the opportunity to regain that fuel that maybe they don't always have or have the opportunity to have. I never understood why it was looked at as such a negative thing to talk about your emotions. But I will say that to the young people, of, if you have the opportunity to go to therapy, do it. I have seen people change within a year Like, and I'm not saying that that's how long everybody's journey is going to take, but it's so significant and such a beautiful thing to see. And that's the biggest encouragement that I can give them, you know, whether that's going to therapy. And in the case that you don't, I respect that. It's your decision at the end of the day. But also, like, looking at life, like, you are, no matter what you do throughout life, there is a hardship and there will be obstacles. There is no such thing as a smooth ride throughout life. Even the kids that are considered quote unquote nepo babies, they even have their own struggles. Some people don't always want it to see it that way. Oh, they have all this money in the world. Who gives? They go through shit too. Like, and everybody has their own obstacles. It's a matter of learning how to overcome them. And are you going to allow that obstacle to weigh you down and not allow you to move forward? Or are you going to give it its opportunity to be like, how is it that I can learn from it? I'm a firm believer of looking back at life and being like, oh, do you regret anything? When people ask me that, hell no. Because to be honest, if I look at life and I look back and be like, oh, I regret this, this, and this, I wouldn't be a quarter of the person. Hell, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I tell people that say, oh, I regret when this. No, because if anything, I want you to look back at that and then tell yourself, what have you learned from it? What have you learned from it? Period.
That's 100% true. I mean, I think that the main thing that, to kind of go back from what you're saying, obviously all life experiences have value, and that's why you want to learn from individuals who are older. You want to learn from people who have been through life and have all the different things and perspectives that you would never view or see. And, you know, you talk about counseling for men, and I think for everyone that's out there, you got, and a man especially, if you need it, go get it. And I think that it, again, you have so many different perspectives when you have a kid that I never really understood. But there's daddy guilt, right? Like, what is that? That's me working every single day, and like you feel like you're providing every single day.
Provider.
You're providing, you're going, you're hustling, but then at the same time, it's like, oh shit, do I know? I don't know how to turn it off. I don't. I'll tell you straight up, if I could work 9 to 9, I would. That's just that I have that ability to like keep going, keep pushing, and I don't have a shut off button. There's daddy guilt. There's that feeling where you feel like you have to suppress certain emotions because you have to be the man of the household. And I think that that's something within our culture where you have to be like, I have to hold it down. Even though my girl is breaking down, even though everything, I have to wake up, go to work, and put a smile on my face and go through it on a daily basis.
You're a human at the end of the day.
And that's where people need to understand that and this is funny, a conversation that I had with my girl. I always say a big house with no love, and I'll say it again, a big house with no love is an empty house. It doesn't necessarily mean that just because you have a mansion, you have the best thing, the best cars, the best things in the world, but you don't have no love within your family. The foundation isn't set. The foundation isn't there. It doesn't mean anything.
Absolutely.
There's no monetary value. You know, the value is within the happiness, that the joy, the memories that you could bring within your house. And I think that that's the overall journey that I see within our house. Mom and dad never made it feel like there was no love in the house. The foundations were there. Their connection was always there. They always communicated. We always felt like no matter what was going on, and I think that's the miracle that came about, is that we always had love. We always had happiness. We always stayed positive. We were in the hospital. You had stage 4 cancer. We had everything that we felt like we were probably rock bottom, but it didn't feel that way. I was playing video games in the damn hospital. I would get ice cream. We'd be laughing, smiling, go to McDonald's, go this. Baseball, always keeping the positivity around. And I think that that's why right now, even though there might be something that be going so bad and the world's going out left and right, but I'm just like, we'll figure it out. You know, I think mom and dad instilled that mindset in me to this day that, like, you know, just trying to stay as positive as possibly can. And it's like, my girl's always like, man, you're just, no matter what, people could stomp on you, kick you, and you're just like, all right, we'll figure it out, you're fine, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel blessed for that. And, you know, I think I want to kind of wrap everything up.
Please.
For you to understand and ask if you had any questions for me. I know you said you had a question for me, but I want you to share to all the, you know, little girls out there and women out there that, you know, feel, obviously there might be some perspective where they feel like they have a disadvantage in life, but you've been through so many different things.
Yeah.
And you use it to your advantage to be successful. Master's degree, you're successful at your job, and you've been through literally everything, even though people have told you haven't done it.
Mm-hmm.
What piece of advice would you give for a woman that is just trying to accomplish their goals and their dreams, even though all the odds might be against them, no matter whether it be family related, health related, all odds are against you? What did you learn throughout your journey to accomplish all the things that you thought you could never accomplish?
I mean, for me, personally, for me, I mean, it really does boil down to family, you know? And for those who don't always have that, I'm also a firm believer in family is not always something. And I think in our culture, it's always like, oh, blood is thicker than water, which for us, absolutely. But for those who don't have that, for those who do not have the family that they can stick with, or maybe don't have that connection, family can also be found through friends. Utilize the supports and find the healthy supports. Don't allow yourself to settle for somebody that is giving you ill will treatment, you know? I think in life there was a point where I'm like, oh, I want to have friends. I want to have a lot. Who gives a shit? Like, I don't need, like, I've gotten to the point in my life, and I want women and just people in general. If somebody is not bringing you, like, joy and happiness, like, and they're just putting you down, you don't need them in your life. Allow them to exit the way that they entered, to be frank with you. Those people were meant to be a part of your journey. It's not to say, oh, well, why did I allow? No, because at the end of the day, I look at a journey like a book. You are the main character. And at the time when you're being the main character in your book, you're going to assume that every single person that enters your life is somebody that's going to stay there forever. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe your book is going to look a little bit different. Why? Because you're growing and you're recognizing the people that you should allow to have yourself in your life that bring you happy into your inner circle, you know? And I know not everybody is about faith, but I have found my own faith in myself through God. And it's been such a beautiful thing for me, I think, for such a long time. Ironically, although I've been through what I've been through, I think I had a lot of questions. Naturally so, especially being through what I've been through. But, oh, like, is it there? Is it? No. Like, and I think that's also been the biggest thing that I've connected back to. And I feel like a lot of people in today's society have lost sight in that. And just to be able to have the opportunity to reconnect back in any form of faith that they may have, you know, again, just utilizing the supports that you have, utilizing the faith that you have, and just continuing to allow the people in your circle to be positive people in your circle. And when I say positive, I mean people that are going to be able to give you constructive criticism while also being able to support you as you're trying to configure things that you're going through in life. And that is the biggest thing of advice that I feel like I can give to people is family, a healthy overall support. And that's, yeah, those are kind of the points that I have to make. I did have a question for you, but you had already answered it. I was going to say, like, being a loan officer and also just being in this type of job on a personal level, like, what are the most difficult things and what are things that are coming to light? For example, like, in the beginning, what did you think this job was going to be, and what is the difference between where you're at now?
The expectation of when you get into this job is you want anything and everything that the people on the top have.
Mm-hmm.
And you automatically assume that that's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
You want the nice cars, you want to get in this industry, and you assume that that's the lifestyle that you want.
Mm-hmm.
You get to a certain point, though, that you understand and realize what you really want is you still want to have that type of lifestyle. You want to have the things and be able to provide experiences for your family that you never would thought that you could experience.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, you want that plus more time.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly realized that because, you know, I love what I do. Yeah. Every single day, I love what I do. I want to help the entire world. I wish I could multiply myself times 10 and have 7 different arms and be able to, you know, do different things that I can. But, you know, you quickly realize that just time isn't something that you have the busier you get. and that's how you value it. That's how much you really can't explain how much more you value time. Because now, instead, before I would be like, oh, I'd pick up the phone at 8 o'clock and I really don't care. I'll pick it up at any time. I don't care. And then you get to a certain point where it's 8 o'clock and, 8 o'clock on a Saturday or Sunday and you're with your family and you're like, should I pick up the call? Inside me is like, okay, pick up the call, do it. You will be quick, 5 minutes. But then
The
reality,
5 minutes turns into like 20.
5 minutes turns to 20 minutes. Then someone else calls you. Then it's another 20 minutes. So it's those little things that you're taking time away from your family when you're investing your time into your business to be able to live the lifestyle that you want. But in reality, you're working for your family, but then you lose sight of that at some point because you're working so hard and this is your baby, right? This is your business, is your baby. You did everything to get to the point where you want to be. So you want to nurture this baby as much as you possibly can and grow it and allow that to be the one thing that you created and you allowed it to grow. But then you have your actual baby. You have your actual family. And now you're sitting here like, well, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose this. How can I juggle the two? Because I'm working this so that it could fund this and this could grow. But then you're like, wait. I don't want this to go down. I want this to go up and I want this to go up and I want it to all come together. And the true reality of it is the bigger you get, the more time that you have, the more you value it. So as you expand and as you grow, I look back and I'm like, I expected this career to be something. When I first did I mean, we'd go to Cubs games, we go to dinners, we go all this stuff. So you expect that. That's the expectation. Yeah. And, now you're sitting back and you're like, okay, how can I produce more business, invest in the business, but create more time for myself? Yeah. And the more that you grow, the more that you scale, you kind of sit back and realize and you look at these big business owners and that's what they do. They figure out how can they multiply themselves, how can they recreate more time so they can be with their family. But I never thought that I would ever say that. I thought I'll be like, okay, I'll be 30, 40, 100 million, whatever production, and I'm just going to keep going until I burn out, But you quickly realize that that's just not a healthy lifestyle for your family, which is okay. Like there's certain people who have this mindset where it's like work 24/7, do this, da-da-da. And I have that mindset. I'm be honest, I do have that mindset. But, you get to a certain point where you understand internally it's not healthy for your family. I also don't want my daughter to be like, yo, papi's always working 24/7. Like I don't want to have that. And it goes back to that's why I tell you what I tell you in the gym, and I reflect on how did we get through those obstacles? How did we get through everything as a family? Well, I think it's through love. Yeah. It was through devotion, passion. My parents always felt love. I always felt positive. We always felt as a unit. It always felt together. There was never a moment where we felt separated. It always felt together, and that's why I felt like we can get through anything in the world. And I want to provide that same experience for my family. Absolutely. Because if you're not working for that purpose, in my eyes, I don't see a reason to work. So I want to bring that same level of love, positivity, and happiness into my family. So that way now there's not one thing as a unit, as a family that we can't get through. Yeah. So ultimately, to answer your question, how did I feel like this business was going to go? In the beginning, when I was semi-busy, I was like, I could conquer the world and some. Now you get really busy and you're like, fuck, I can only conquer half the world and I'm not even nowhere near to where I thought I was going to be. And I'm still want to grow, but I got a lot of learning to do. And it has nothing to do with business. It has to do with being a better father, being a better man. Because I already know what I got to do to be the best version of myself. Yeah. But now you're starting to self-develop and recognize and realize I got to learn to be the best version of myself over here as well. So keep this energy at the same level. And people say there's not a work-life balance. There is. You just got to figure it out, how to leverage your time in a sense where you have both. Yeah. And you invest in the right people, the good people. Now your business becomes a part of your family. And now it's all one, and you figure out how to go through the two. But just value your time and recognize that, the more that you have a safe and sound foundation of your family, everything else will play out. So
That's
pretty
beautiful.
much the wrapping of everything. But I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
My beautiful sister. Everybody, if you have not already, please make sure to like, subscribe, turn your post notifications, and you make sure you watch this entire episode. It was absolutely amazing, super inspiring. But again, I really do appreciate your time.
No, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate Neighborhood Loans and your group for everything I do. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Love you, bro.
Make sure you get your cafecito. Love you too.
Bye.